Hi there guys, I hope you're well and you're having a fantastic start to the week, and I also hope that you enjoyed writing your interesting lists last week. Now, a couple of weeks ago you may remember that we did a little task based around sweets, and in particular on the chapter where Roald Dahl goes into a lot of detail describing all of his most favourite sweets from his childhood. And at that point I did promise that we would revisit that chapter at some point and find out about the little plot that he and his friends get embroiled in because of their dislike of Mrs. Pratchett, who owns the sweet shop. Well, today I am going to read you the remainder of that chapter. We're going to learn about what Roald Dahl in particular gets himself involved in, and we're going to use this as a leaping off point for a piece of writing this week. So without further ado, I'm just going to continue with that chapter. The sweet shop in Llandaff in the year 1923 was the very centre of our lives. To us, it was what a bar is to a drunk or a church is to a bishop. Without it, there would have been little to live for. But it had one terrible drawback, this sweet shop. The woman who owned it was a horror. We hated her, and we had good reason for doing so. Her name was Mrs. Pratchett. She was a small, skinny old hag with a moustache on her upper lip and a mouth as sour as a green gooseberry. She never smiled. She never welcomed us when we went in, and the only times she spoke were when she said things like, "I'm watching you, so keep your thieving fingers off them chocolates," or, "I don't want you in here just to look around. Either your fork's out or your git's out." But by far the most loathsome thing about Mrs. Pratchett was the filth that clung around her. Her apron was grey and greasy. Her blouse had bits of breakfast all over it, toast crumbs and tea stains and splotches of dried egg yolk. It was her hands, however, that disturbed us most. They were disgusting. They were black with dirt and grime. They looked as though they'd been putting lumps of coal on the fire all day long. And do not forget, please, that it was these very hands and fingers that she plunged into the sweet jars when we asked for a pennyworth of treacle toffee or wine gums or nut clusters or whatever. There were precious few health laws in those days, and nobody, least of all Mrs. Pratchett, ever thought of using a little shovel for getting out the sweets as they do today. The mere sight of her grimy right hand with its black fingernails digging an ounce of chocolate fudge out of a jar would have caused a starving tramp to go running from the shop. But not us. Sweets were our lifeblood. We would have put up with far worse than that to get them. So we simply stood and watched in sullen silence while this disgusting old woman stirred around inside the jars with her foul fingers. The other thing we hated Mrs. Pratchett for was her meanness. Unless you spent a whole sixpence all in one go, she wouldn't give you a bag. Instead, you got your sweets twisted up in a small piece of newspaper, which she tore off a pile of old Daily Mirrors lying on the counter. So you can well understand that we had it in for Mrs. Pratchett in a big way. But we didn't quite know what to do about it. Many schemes were put forward, but none of them was any good. None of them, that is, until suddenly, one memorable afternoon, we found the dead mouse.